My castaway this week is Miriam Margolyes. The term character actress could well have been coined just for her. She has spent a career bringing fruity, rich, full-bodied individuals to our screens, with more than 40 movie credits to her name. And her extraordinary ear for dialect and dialogue has earned her a place as the busiest voice in the business. She has spent a lifetime not just working hard, but dealing too with the disappointment that she's not the most important person on earth. She has her doting parents to blame for that particular delusion. They were a family so wrapped up in each other, she says, that the outside world had almost no emotional significance for me. Miriam Margolyes, I'm wondering then if you're over that, not being the most important person in the world.
I hope I am, because I'd be a really damaged creature if I weren't. But I do still think sometimes that I should be treated better. I mean, it's taken a jolly long time to get onto Desert Island Discs, so I'm really glad to be here, because it is a mark of having arrived at something.
Indeed. Well, you're here now, so let's enjoy it. And what about this volume of work that you churn out? Are you just a girl who can't say no to work?
Well, under certain circumstances. I don't know. It never seems to me that I have the career that I want, but I think all actors say that. I'm not happy with what I've given to the world.
I'm so surprised that you say that.
No, honestly, I think I'm underused and undervalued and perhaps slightly despised. I've got a good voice, and my whole life really is based on voice and on understanding voices and searching for people's backgrounds, using voice as my starting off point. But no, I wanted more out of my skills. I wanted to do Shakespeare. I wanted to be at the National. I wanted to be admired as an actress. And I think at the moment I'm just kind of smiled at as an actress. And I want to touch people, and I want to hurt and astonish, I think. And I haven't done that yet, but maybe I will.
What makes you think you haven't?
Well, because nobody says so, she said rather wistfully. No, I think there's a lot more to do, and I'm 67. And if I'm lucky, I have another 10 years or so. If I'm lucky, then I look back on what I've done and what I've achieved, and it's not enough.
There's a lot of the spoken word in your choices today. Does that mark a particular antipathy towards music, or is it just that your world is about words?
I think it's not antipathy to music, because I do listen to music, but I don't buy... I have to call them records. It's not called records
that's
anymore,
all right.
But that's what I've always called them, records. I don't understand all this noisy banging sort of music. Is it called garage? I mean, for me, garage is where you keep your car. I don't understand.
And me, we're perfectly matched in that regard then. Tell me about your first choice today.
You mentioned that voice was important to me, and one of the first voices that I remember impinging on my life was Dylan Thomas. And the richness of his voice and the particularity of his vision excites me. And this particular bit that I've chosen, I think it's just wonderfully done. And you're pulled into that world that he creates with that rich, sonorous, amused voice.
They said, "You aren't dead, Mr. Thomas. How can you be buried then?" "Nobody's going to bury you in Llanstefan." "Come on home, Mr. Thomas. There's strong beer for tea and cake." But Grandpa stood firmly on the bridge and clutched his bag to his side and stared at the flowing river and the sky like a prophet who was in no doubt.
Dylan Thomas reading part of his poem A Visit to Grandpa's. You were in some sort of ecstasy there, listening to that.
It's a magic piece, and he was a magician.
Tell me about the early days. Home life. There was you and Mum and Dad. It was a very secure upbringing, was it?
Well, of course, we would never have said Mum and Dad. Mummy would call that common.
I'm
because
sorry
she was
to
a bit
be
of a
common.
social climber.
Well, I'm not.
It was always Mummy and Daddy. Well,
Right.
It was North Oxford, you see.
Yes.
And North Oxford means a great deal to me. It was where I was born, and it was where I went to school at the Oxford High School from 1945 to 1960, and when I went up to Cambridge. And my school was really the focus of my life in Oxford.
You said that your mother was something of a social climber, but I've also read you say now, looking back, you think she was a bit vulgar.
Yes, I'm trying to be objective about my parents. When I had therapy many, many years ago, in order to put me back together again, I was a bit fragmented. And by the way, I'm absolutely together now. My therapist said that I must be objective about my parents. And you know, it's the hardest thing for me to be objective about my mother and father, whom I adored. And for me to make any criticism of Mummy feels like treachery. But I suspect she could have been a little bit vulgar, as indeed am I. But she was shrewd and clever. I feel it difficult to say anything about her because she was a wonderful person.
And were you an only child by design? Did your parents want a small family?
My mother was frightened of childbirth because my cousins, or her cousins, had died in childbirth in South Africa. So I think that she really was afraid to have children. And I know I was conceived in an air raid, which may have had an effect one way or another. But she never did it again. Well, she never had children again. I don't know about the rest.
And your father's Scottish, a dour Scot?
Yes, he had the qualities of being Jewish and being Scottish together, which is quite a formidable combination.
He was a very sombre, quiet man, but full of integrity. And he would always say, "Behave yourself, Miriam, behave yourself."
And of course, I haven't, alas. But he was a man who found it difficult to be joyous, whereas my mother was a very joyous person. They had an excellent marriage, and we were a real family. But I wasn't the daughter that they should have had, probably. And I've always felt a little bit that I've disappointed them. You know, I didn't marry, I didn't have children. But I am an OBE.
It's not bad going.
It'll have to do.
Papa, can you hear me? Papa, can you see me? Papa, can you find me in the night? Papa, are you near me? Papa, can you hear me? Papa, can you help me not be frightened? Looking at the skies, I seem to see a million eyes. Which ones are yours? Where are you now that yesterday has waved goodbye and closed its doors? The night is so much darker, the wind is so much colder. The world I see is so much bigger now that I'm alone. Papa, please forgive me. Try to understand me. Papa, don't you know I had no choice? Can you hear me praying? Anything I'm saying, even though the night is filled with voices. I remember everything you taught me, every book I've ever read. Can all the words in all the books help me to face what lies ahead? The trees are so much taller, and I feel so much smaller. The moon is twice as lonely, and the stars are half as bright. Papa, how I love you. Papa, how I need you. Papa, how I miss you. Keep
me about your next choice, then.
Well, that is Jerusalem, which was the anthem that we sang at school, and to me it symbolises that part of my life, my school, and the English part of me, because I am very English. I've got this funny, posh English voice. So Jerusalem is for the other bit of me. You know, that makes me think of a woman I had an affair with once. She was a member of the Women's Institute, and they sing it there, and she said, whenever I hear those words, arrows of desire, I think of you.
Well, it was Jerusalem, for all sorts of reasons, sung by the Liverpool Cathedral Choir with the massed choirs from Merseyside and the Liverpool Cathedral Brass Ensemble. You speak so warmly about school, clearly a happy time. Were you clearly, I imagine, a very bright little button?
I was a very naughty schoolgirl, very naughty indeed. I was always being sent out and sent to Miss Stack's office, who was our headmistress, and she was rather severe. She had been the head of studies at Holloway Prison, and I think some of the techniques were brought back to the Oxford High School. I was quite frightened of her, but not frightened enough.
Did you delight in being naughty?
Yes, I think I did, and I still do.
Yes.
I mean, I like to be a bit cheeky. I know I do, which is it's got to be slapped down, and I hope you will if it reappears again. But it was a very happy time of my life, and I loved those girls, and I still do.
Were you funny then? Were you a funny schoolgirl?
I think I was. I think I was amusing. I was the form wag, and people laughed at me, and I realised that laughter was like love, and I can't get enough of it.
You can't, yes. You need the approval of people around you.
Yes,
I
do.
Want to be liked.
I desperately want to be liked. I'll do almost anything to be liked. I mean, it's a bit serious.
Were you a show-off in school?
Of course. Look, acting is just paid show-off stuff. That's what I'm doing, showing off. And it is fun. It's lovely, and I hope I can go on getting paid for it.
Were you in school productions?
Yes, I was a rather amazing Brutus. I remember my toga kept slipping off and causing consternation to the parents in the front row.
as a teenager, you modelled for Augustus John, is that right?
Yes, I did. There was a programme on television called Face to Face, and one day Augustus John was on that programme. And I just thought, what a gorgeous man. He was about, I suppose he must have been in his 80s then, shortly before he died. And I wrote to him and said, would you like me to model for you? And he got his wife, Dorelia, to ring my parents and check that it was all right. And she said, well, do come to the... You should talk like that. It was very, very far back. And she said, do come. By the way, it is in the nude. Is that all right? And so I was taken there by my parents, and I took off my clothes very expertly, and he wanted me to go up and down a ladder. I don't know why, but I did. And he'd do some sketches of me, and we talked a lot. And I remember very well that he said,
you see that picture up there on the wall? That's by my sister, Gwen. And one day people will find out she's a much greater painter than I am.
And I think it's true.
And can it also be true, whilst we're in the area of name-dropping, that Isaiah Berlin sponsored your university application form, or wrote something on it?
Yes, it's true. My father was the doctor to his parents, and my father spoke Yiddish, and his parents were from Riga, and they only spoke Yiddish, they didn't speak English. And my mother, who was this brilliant lady, she invited him to supper one day, and she asked him, would you sponsor Miriam for university entrance? Oh, no problem at all. You could never understand the thing he said, actually. I mean, I know he was brilliant, but you had to read it rather than listen to it. And he did, of course. Oxford and Cambridge wouldn't dream of saying no to somebody who was sponsored by Isaiah Berlin, so I got in to both of them.
And given that your mummy had great aspirations for you...
That's better, dear.
She was presumably delighted that you were on your way to Cambridge.
It was the fulfilment of all her hopes. In that way, I fulfilled my parents' hopes, yes. I got into Newnham College, Cambridge, and that's really when my life started.
We shall talk about that in just a moment. For now, tell me about your third choice.
I've chosen the aria Queen of the Night from The Magic Flute. It's very much to do with my worship of the voice. I just can't believe that any human being can make this noise, and I love listening to it.
Lucia Pop singing Queen of the Night from Mozart's Magic Flute. Was it a household where achievement was important?
It was a Jewish household, so of course achievement was important, because that's how you pulled yourself out of the depths. My parents wanted me to go to university, but the reason that they wanted me to go to university was because you'll meet the right people and you will be able to talk to anybody about anything. And that was something that my mother was very sensitive about, because she felt she was educationally challenged and she couldn't. But they wanted me to be in some kind of social elite that comes from being excluded. They were outsiders, and I think they felt they'd been submerged.
And did you feel included when you went to Cambridge, or did you feel something of an outsider?
No, I always felt that Cambridge belonged to me. Me personally, it was my Cambridge. It was a thrilling time, and my parents used to come up to visit me so much that people thought that they were actually part of the student body. They loved going there.
Did you like that? Because, I mean, one of the most useful things about being a student, of course, is separating yourself from your parents, being away from them, not being identified with them.
Well, as you see quite clearly, I have not separated myself from my parents, and I probably never will. No, I was a little bit embarrassed, but they loved it, and I'm glad that they enjoyed it, and I'm glad they came.
You were a performer too. You were a member of Footlights round about the same time as people like John Cleese and Graham Chapman. Were you welcomed into the fold?
At that time, girls were not welcome in Footlights. We weren't allowed to belong, actually. We were just there on sufferance. And I didn't like any of those Footlights boys, and they didn't like me. And it makes me sound like a crabby old bitch, which I may well be, but I didn't like them. They weren't interested in girls they didn't sleep with, and I certainly wasn't in that department, because at Cambridge, I didn't have sex at Cambridge. You just didn't do it.
Why not?
I mean, well, I think it was partly because my parents told me that I mustn't. And also, of course, I didn't know then that I was gay, which I am, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I was tearing around, rather frustrated. I did have a boyfriend, and we did, I think, what we call heavy necking. I think that's what it's called, or petting or something like that. But nothing much happened, you know. It was rather unfulfilling.
Tell me about your next choice, then.
Well, I have a man in my life, and his name is Charles Dickens. I love the world he creates. I love the power of the prose and the characters that he created, and he created over 2,000 characters, ebullient and just full of life. I think he is just remarkable, and I couldn't be on a desert island without him. So I have chosen a piece from Great Expectations, where the great Miss Havisham is displayed.
Tell me, Pip, do you admire her?
Surely anyone must who sees her.
Come close, Pip. Come close. Love her, Pip. Love her, love her, love her. If she favours you, love her. If she wounds you, if she tears your heart to pieces, love her. Love her with blind devotion. Submit to her. Give up your soul to her. Love her as I have loved.
So, Miriam Margolyes, you left Cambridge and, am I right, one of your first jobs was voicing up soft porn movies?
How embarrassing. Yes, I was asked to do, for money of course, and it wasn't that much money, I think I got about 250 quid, but I was asked to do an audio recording. I would like to make that clear. It wasn't in vision. And the title of the record was Sexy Sonia, Leaves from My Schoolgirl Diary. And
I think we've got the picture.
I'm very glad. Every now and again people remind me of it, and I am a bit embarrassed because I don't approve of pornography, actually.
But at the time, didn't you go into the local, I imagine probably somewhere like Soho, to see how well it was selling?
I did. I checked on the sales, actually, and what was embarrassing was that the chap who was behind the counter said, when I said I was Sexy Sonia, he looked round quickly and he said, "Shh!" And I realised that he didn't want anyone to know that I was Sexy Sonia because I don't look great, and it might have turned them off their fancy.
Well, you say you don't look great. Of course, actresses notably are obsessed by the way that they look.
Yes, we are, and I'm obsessed with the way I look. I love my face. I think it's fabulous, but I don't like my body, and it's up to me to do something about it, and I've been fat all my life. But there it is. I've just got this endomorphic frame.
But what about your body then? I mean, if you're on film...
What about my body, dear?
Well, that must be very difficult. If you feel dissatisfied with your body, then to put it on screen in front of millions of people must be a difficult experience.
Yes, I spend a lot of time in corsets because I seem to be in a lot of period stuff, and I realise that I'm just a fat lady, and what can I say? I mean, here I am. I stand before you.
I was so surprised to hear you say when we began talking that you were in some way dissatisfied with your career, that you haven't had the career that you want, because it seems to me you've fashioned a very clever career. We see you playing these wonderful, rich parts, these character parts, and at the same time you record all of these books that are so well received. Why would you be dissatisfied when you've built a career like that has these different dimensions?
I think actors always want more. I think we're greedy. I would like to be at the National. I would love to have the parts that, say, Joan Plowright has. In fact, she really gets in my way.
You went to London for an audition, Joan, when you were just a girl of 16. For an audition in Soho. That was very daring.
Yes. My brother, who was at music college, met me and took me to this dreadful little office up some back stairs where there was a waiting room full of dyed blonde-haired ladies in nylons and fur coats.
What did you look like?
I was in my school raincoat, if I remember rightly, and a beret. And it didn't occur to me that clothes mattered all that much. I liked acting. I knew I could act.
And what did you prepare? What did you do for your audition?
Oh, I had prepared one or two things, but I never got the opportunity to do anything. He just called me in and said, look at this, various wastepaper baskets full of torn-up letters. He was just telling me about the precarious nature of the profession. And after sort of 2-3 minutes, he just said to me, go home, my dear, go home.
That was it?
that was it. I wasn't allowed to do any audition that I'd prepared.
Tell me about your next piece of music, then.
My next choice is my friend Martin Jarvis reading part of Violet Elizabeth Takes Control by Richmal Crompton, and he is a great voice artist. How can I put it? He tugs us in, and we live with him in that world, and it's just an example of voice work at its absolute best.
William at normal times disliked Violet Elizabeth. He disliked her curls and pink and white complexion and blue eyes and lisp and frills and flounces and imperiousness and tears. The rain had stopped. "Good afternoon, William," said Violet Elizabeth. "Afternoon," said William, without discontinuing his moody scowl and his hunched-up onward march. Violet Elizabeth joined him and trotted by his side. "You feeling sad, William?" she said sweetly. "Anyone who feels sad," burst out William. "How was I to know a book didn't know what it was talking about? You'd think a book would know, wouldn't you? Blaming me because a book didn't know what it was talking about. It's enough to make anyone feel sad. Well, you'd think a book about machinery'd know just a bit about machinery, wouldn't you? Sinking me in a mucky old pond, and then, when you'd think they'd be a bit sorry for me, going on as if it's my fault, as if I'd wrote the book."
Martin Jarvis reading part of Violet Elizabeth Takes Control by Richmal Crompton. Given this apparent huge confidence, I wonder if you're ever intimidated. I'm thinking about when you walk onto Martin Scorsese's set, or Baz Luhrmann calls you up and says, "I've got you in mind for something." Are you ever overwhelmed by
I'm always overwhelmed. I'm totally scared stiff.
Are you?
I'm a frightened little muffin, actually, and all this big talk and swaggering about is just to cover up a real terror, I think. I'm really afraid a lot of the time, and afraid of failure, and I do what I can to overcome that.
Is that what, earlier on you said there was a point in your life when you were going through your therapy and that you're all put together now, but there was a point when you were in pieces. Was it the terror that shook you into pieces?
To be honest, the reason that I went to the therapist was because I was having marital difficulties. But because I've been with my partner for 40 years now, but we did go through a bump, and I needed to be put together again. And I am now. I sometimes jokingly say that I think I'm perfect. Well, I don't really think I'm perfect, but I'm not far off.
Was it a long journey putting the pieces back together?
I think it took about 2 years. And I used to then go for what Margaret called top-ups. She was terrific. She said to me, "You splash your yellow wellies in the puddles, and your what she called show business people talented toddlers. You're a talented toddler." She said, your emotional age is about 7, but if we're very lucky we'll get it to be 12. But that will be a triumph.
Tell me about your next choice, then.
I've chosen the Kol Nidre prayer, and as with most of the records that I've chosen, it's about representation of bits of my life. And I've mentioned many times probably that I'm Jewish, and that's very important to me. I have to mention also that I reject many of the things that I see in the Jewish world, and I passionately object to the way that Israel is dealing with Palestine. I have been castigated by many Jews who feel that I am betraying my people, and I can't help it. I have to say what I believe, and I am a proud Jew, but I am also an ashamed Jew. And I've chosen the Kol Nidre because being Jewish and the fine ethics of the religion, they do inform my life, and I could never be without them. So that's the reason for Kol Nidre.
Richard Tucker singing the Kol Nidre. Tell me about your next piece of music, then.
This is the famous scene on the balcony from Private Lives with Noel Coward and Gertie Lawrence. This is an example of complete, utter excellence and control, and I will never tire of hearing it.
We met on a house party in Norfolk.
Very flat, Norfolk.
There's no need to be unpleasant.
But was no reflection on her, unless of course she made it flatter.
Your voice takes on an acid quality every time you mention her.
I swear I'll never mention her again.
Good. Now keep off yours.
Thank you.
Not at all. That orchestra seems to have a remarkably small repertoire.
Strange how potent cheap music is.
Noel Coward and Gertrude Lawrence in Coward's Private Lives, recorded in 1930. It's extraordinary the amount of emotion, the depth of that, when they're saying essentially so little.
That's their skill. I know very few people who can do that now. My great friend Patricia Hodge is one of them, and she is, for me, the reincarnation of Gertie Lawrence.
What about your outrageousness? I need to ask you about that. I mean, people will see you on now and again on things like Graham Norton's show, saying very, very, very rude things indeed.
I know.
What is that? What's that all about?
It's part of wanting to shock, I suppose, and also I like to confront the things that other people don't seem prepared to. And it's a compulsion, a little bit. It's a kind of verbal Tourette, I suppose, and it makes me laugh. I think knickers and lavatories and things like that are hugely funny, and breasts. I just love the whole physical part of life. It's hysterically funny.
You said a few discs ago that you're just a frightened little muffin. I mean, you seem the absolute opposite of that. You seem like somebody who would be daunted by nothing and could say anything at any moment.
I'm good at it, aren't I? You see, my disguise is very good.
But it's part of you, surely. It's not just simply a disguise.
I think I'm confident when I'm with people. People give me confidence. They don't frighten me. But if I stop to think about it for too long, then I get nervous, and then I need reassurance. And the way I reassure myself is to say something shocking, because I suppose for a moment it gives me back the power, because I'm in charge. And I'm a control freak, that's probably it.
A desert island's going to be tricky then, because of course you'll have nobody to shock.
Gosh, I never thought of that. I would be very lonely. I don't think I'd like it.
How are you domestically? What sort of person are you to live with?
I have no domesticity in me. I don't have that button. No, I am hopeless. I can barely boil an egg.
So you wouldn't be foraging in the bushes for berries?
Foraging in the bushes? I should think not.
For food, I'm thinking.
Oh, I see. Well, no. No, for food? Oh, gosh, no, there won't be a shop. Oh, crikey. Well, I don't know what I'd do. Will there be berries and nuts and things?
Probably.
The trouble is I'm so short I just can't reach them off the trees. It's going to be a hideous time.
It is. You're conjuring up a very, very sad picture.
A sad, disconsolate, starving woman. Mind you, I'll lose weight, won't I? That'll be good.
Let's comfort ourselves with some music then. What's your final choice?
Well, my final choice is Schubert's Trout Quintet. This was the first piece of music that I ever listened to with my partner. She made me sit down and listen to it. So it's all about her and me, as well as Schubert.
Ian Brown and the Nash Ensemble with the opening of the fourth movement of Schubert's Trout Quintet, and you said that was for your partner who you've been with for 40 years.
That's right. She's very, very different from me. She's a grown-up.
Well, she's not going to be on this island, of course, and now I am going to give you the Bible or the Torah, whichever you prefer, and the complete works of Shakespeare, and you can take one other book to the island with you.
Well, it would have to be the Bible, and it must be the King James version of the Bible. I can't read Hebrew, to my shame, and I won't have anything to do with the revised version. It's just not good enough.
All right.
And what else have I got to do?
Well, you can choose a book. You can take your own book. Just one book.
Oh, pooh, that's horrible.
There you are. Just one book.
Well, I suppose it would have to be Little Dorrit.
You may have that. And a luxury to make life a little more bearable.
Could I have a flush toilet?
Yes.
I'll have a flush toilet then.
It's my pleasure to give you that. And if I was to force you to choose just one of these tracks to take with you, which disc would it be?
Oh, it would be the Schubert.
You are, as you say, Miriam Margolyes, perfectly straightforward about your sexuality, but you say at university you weren't having proper romances, proper encounters. When did you begin to look your sexuality in the eye?
In the eye?
Well, yes, that was maybe the wrong choice of phrasing.
I suppose I really came to terms with things in 1967. I don't know how old I was then. If I was born in 41, you can perhaps work it out. I can't. But anyway, I was in my late 20s, so it was a bit late for that sort of thing. And I know when I told my mother that I had had an affair with a woman, she had a stroke about 3 days later. And, that's pretty shocking for me to have to deal with.
How did you deal with that?
Well, I realised that telling people things that they can't deal with is an indulgence, and so I advise people who may be in the same position as me and find that they are homosexual that they should just keep it to themselves. I don't agree with actors talking about their sex life. I've done it now because it doesn't matter anymore, but when I was younger I wouldn't talk about it at all. But if it can help somebody, then I would speak. But I was very shocked by what happened to my mother, and indeed that started the long period of her terrible illness and the blackest time of my life. The only good thing was that I had my partner in my life, and she is still there.
As you say, a 40-year relationship, an enduring relationship. Of course, that would mean to your mother that she was never going to have grandchildren. Do you think that was her sorrow?
Yes, I think that was part of it, and also because it was shameful in the 60s. People you weren't supposed to have that sort of thing. It was not proper. You know, it's just nonsense. I mean, it's just like anything else. If you're gay or straight, it really shouldn't matter, and people should pull themselves together about it. I want to be somebody that people admire as an actress. And when I got the OBE, it was for services to drama. It wasn't for services to sex.
You've said it's very unusual to hear people say that, you know, there are times when honesty is not the best policy, when it is an indulgence to be honest. Do you regret that you told your mother?
Yes, I do. Because it caused the person that I loved most in the world a pain she could not bear. And I have to take the responsibility for that. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because we always spoke everything to each other. We always said everything. That was what we had, a completely open, loving relationship together. But I should have been aware that was something I could not say, and I really do regret it.
And she didn't live to see your towering success and all these years of employment.
No, she didn't. She didn't. And that is so sad. I really do. It hurts me.
There's not a morning I begin without 1,000 questions running through my mind, that I don't try to find the reason and the logic in the world that God designed, the reason why a bird was given wings, if not to fly and praise the sky with every song it sings. What's right or wrong, where I belong within the scheme of things. And do I have eyes that see and arms that reach, unless you're meant to know there's something more? If not to hunger for the meaning of it all, then tell me what a soul is for. Why have the wings unless you're meant to fly? And tell me please, why have a mind if not to question why? And tell me where is it written what it is I'm meant to be, that I can't dare to have the chance to pick the fruit of every tree, or have my share of every sweet imagined possibility? Just tell me where. Tell me where. If I were only meant to tend the nest, then why does my imagination sail across the mountains and the seas beyond the make-believe of any fairy tale? Why have the thirst if not to drink the wine, and what a waste to have a taste of things that can't be mine? And tell me where is it written what it is I'm meant to be, that I can dare to find the meanings in the mornings that I see, or have my share of every sweet imagined possibility? Just tell me where is it written? Tell me where. Oh,
Miriam Margolyes, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
It's been quite a ride. Thank you so much.